Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us for another story here at Annie Narrates. The title for this story goes like this. Dad abandons me, the adopted child, for 5 years because his wife is finally pregnant and I am not needed anymore. But now he's back begging me to have me back because his wife's baby was never his, and I couldn't help but drop this one other bombshell on him that leaves him stunned. Hello Reddit. I've been seriously contemplating whether to post this on here for many days, mainly because I want to protect the privacy of everyone involved, and secondly, writing everything down would just make it feel real. So far, I'm still trying to come to terms with everything, but I feel very vulnerable right now, and I would appreciate some advice. So here it goes. Buckle in, because this is a roller coaster ride. I, 23 female, was abandoned by my mother when I was born. She left me at an orphanage and didn't give them many details apart from the fact that she wasn't going to be able to take care of me. I don't remember her at all because she left me when I was not even a day old, but my caretakers at the orphanage said that she was young, probably in college, and she was also very scared. Now, when I think about it, she probably got pregnant by accident. Maybe didn't even tell her family because she was too scared and didn't know what to do, and thought that the best way to make sure I was okay was to give me up. Maybe she wasn't equipped to deal with me. Maybe she didn't want me. I don't know. But these are all assumptions, and I have no idea what the real reason was. I had absolutely no clue who my dad was. Neither did the people at the orphanage. I always wondered about whether he knew of my existence at all. I spent 10 long years in the system and moved from foster home to foster home. Some families were sweet and took good care of me, while some weren't the best. I saw many of my foster parents look after me and kids like me only for the money that the government gave them to look after us. Instead of spending it on us, they would use it for their own biological children. Nothing was permanent. I couldn't call a single place a home. I became friends with a few of my foster siblings only for them to get adopted or relocated. Everything kept changing, and there was no sense of security. I didn't know where I would be a month from now, whether I'd even be in the same house, and because of this uncertainty, I never really settled into my life at any place. I never got too comfortable with any family, because I knew the tide could change anytime. Obviously, this kind of experience in my early childhood left a deep impact on me. I was very socially stunned and barely spoke to anyone. I didn't know how to handle my emotions, so I would have frequent outbursts of anger and be emotionally volatile. I had major trust issues, and it took me a long time to warm up to someone. So yeah, I wasn't the easiest kid to handle. When I was about to turn 10, I was relocated to a new family who were willing to foster me. This was when I met my adopted parents for the first time. My mom and dad, Susan and Richard, were both in their early 30s. They didn't have any children of their own after trying for years, and since they wanted a kid, they decided to look into fostering and eventually adoption, and they had chosen me. I had never been chosen by anyone before. When I met them for the first time, Susan gave me a big hug, and I don't know why, but I felt so comfortable. That was just how she was. Susan, my mom, she was a natural, so gentle, so maternal. Even though she didn't give birth to me, she was my mom. It took me a while to warm up to Susan and Richard especially, because he was a little awkward with me in the beginning. But eventually I started trusting both of them. For the first time in my life, I felt secure. I felt like I was loved and raised my hopes that they would actually adopt me. I moved to my new house, and I was shocked to see that I had my own bedroom with tons of toys. They bought me whatever I wanted, took me to church, put me in a grade school, and took me out on play dates with other kids. I celebrated my first Christmas with them, and I still remember it fondly. The most important thing was that they never made me feel like a burden to them. After fostering me for around 6 months, they officially adopted me. It was the happiest day of my life. I adored Susan and felt very safe around Richard, and I remember feeling so blessed that they decided to choose me and give me this wonderful life. I celebrated my 10th birthday with them and met all my cousins and grandparents. We went on family vacations together. I loved going shopping with mom and having a daddy-daughter day with dad. I started settling into school and making many friends. For the first time, I felt like I belonged somewhere, and I couldn't ask for anything better. We spent 4 blissful years together, just the 3 of us, and we were content. When I was 14, my parents told me that they were expecting another baby. This was a huge shock for all of us, because they didn't think that my mom could ever get pregnant. But this was a miracle, and we were all overjoyed. I couldn't wait to be a big sister, and I truly felt that the addition of this baby would complete our family. Things didn't turn out that way, as fate had other plans. I used to stay back at school on some days for volleyball practice. Usually I would walk home or take the bus. But one day, it started raining terribly, and I was stranded at school. I told my parents that I would wait until it stopped and then walk back, but the rain kept getting progressively heavier, and it didn't look like it was going to stop anytime soon. I called up Dad and asked him if he could pick me up on his way back from work, but he told me that it would take a couple of hours because he too was stuck in traffic because of the rain, and told me to ask Mom to pick me up since she was closer. My mom was 7 months pregnant at the time, and I didn't want her driving in the rain. But as soon as I told her about the situation, she told me that she was on the way and she wasn't going to take no for an answer. I kept waiting and waiting. Usually it would take about 15 minutes to reach, but she never came. I had a feeling in my gut that something was wrong, and then I got a call from Dad, which turned my world upside down. He was in tears, yelling through the phone, telling me that another car had crashed into my mom's and that she was dead. She was killed on the spot, and so was the other driver. I threw up. I had to wait in school for 3 agonizing hours, wrecked with grief, while my dad made arrangements to transport my mom. I had no idea what was going on, where my dad was, or what was going to happen next. All I knew was that I had lost the person that I loved the most in the world, and I was never going to see her again. And it was all my fault. My grandparents picked me up and drove me to the hospital, and that's when I saw her. I couldn't recognize her. My dad had spaced out. He was sitting beside her, numb and silent, just gazing into space with no more tears left to cry. Once he saw me, he broke down again and told me that the baby didn't survive either. It was a boy. Ever since then, the relationship between my dad and I changed for the worse. At a time when we were supposed to help each other through grief, we were at loggerheads with each other. My dad blamed me for the death of my mom and brother. He said that if I hadn't called her, she would have never left and got into that accident, and she would still be alive. I was already guilt-stricken, and his accusations made me feel even worse. I needed him. I wanted him to comfort me. I sometimes just wanted to hug him and feel better, but he pushed me away. We were both hurting so badly. I could hear him wail every night, but every time I went to comfort him, he would slam the door in my face. I wasn't even angry with him. I felt like I deserved it. These wonderful people had given me a new life, and I had ruined theirs. One night, I tried telling my dad how I felt and how depressed I was because of this. Instead of hearing me out, he started yelling at me. He said that it was Mom's idea to adopt me. He wasn't really interested, but went along with it to make her happy. Little did he know that I was going to tear his life apart. He said that he never wanted me, and now that she was dead, he had to take on all the responsibility of me, and I was a constant reminder of her death. A few months later, he started drowning all his sorrows in alcohol. He became unrecognizable and a shell of his former self. I, on the other hand, was in a horrible depression and was going to therapy at school. I lost interest in everything and just wished that I had died that day instead of her. The pain was agonizing. Over the next 2 years, the relationship I had with Dad had completely disintegrated. There wasn't as much animosity anymore, and I still loved him deeply, but all this trauma coupled with his drinking made us distant. I noticed that he had started dating again. I did not question him about it because I wanted him to tell me himself. One evening, a few months after I turned 16, he told me that he had been seeing someone for a couple of months and wanted to introduce me to her. I was surprised that he even wanted to do this and immediately agreed. This was a good sign that he was moving on. That's when I met Stacy. She was this freshly graduated 23-year-old who came across as a mean girl. She was very pretty, but in an unnerving way. When we first met, I could tell that we weren't going to get along. She spoke to me with a lot of condescension and kinda looked down on the way that I dressed and looked. I tried to like her because the last thing I wanted to do was ruin this for my dad. But I knew that the only reason she was with him was for the money. She didn't come across as genuine at all. Even all her compliments were backhanded and fake. But if she made my dad happy, I would grin and smile through it. After this, everything moved at a lightning pace. Within the same year, they were engaged and married the next. I wanted to be a part of the bridal party and requested her to put me in, but she said that I would look too frumpy for the dresses that she had chosen and ruin the aesthetics of the wedding. Even at the reception, I was made to sit at the back of the hall, away from the rest of the family. These were just a few examples of how she treated me. My mom had never made me feel like I was adopted, but Stacy constantly reminded me of it. She said that I had to learn to be grateful for what I had because she could take it away in a minute. She manipulated my dad to not pay for college, even though a college fund was set for me the year I got adopted. She got all the money instead. I stopped getting picket money and any other perks. It was as if she was instigating me to get angry with her so that she could complain to my dad. I kept my mouth shut because I was not going to ruin another relationship, no matter how cruel she was. The distance between my dad just kept growing more and more. It was to the point where I couldn't share anything with him because I didn't want to cause any more trouble. Things just got worse for me after Stacy got pregnant. I was 17 now, and for some reason, she started seeing me as competition. I just tried to mind my business, but she kept doing things to put me down. She told my dad that she felt uneasy around me ever since she got pregnant because the last time I was around a pregnant woman, she died. My dad agreed with her and told me to stay as far away from her as possible, and I obeyed. But I was starting to get annoyed now because no matter what I did, Stacy kept portraying me as evil. One night we got into a huge argument. Stacy told my dad that I was a deadweight and old enough to move out. She said that I was taking advantage of his kindness and overstaying my welcome, and that if I had any decency, I would have left after the incident. I kept quiet. I didn't want to get angry. Then she started telling my dad that she and her baby were his main priorities and that all the money in his will should go to them and not me because I was adopted. She then proceeded to say that I didn't deserve the life I have now and only had it now because of my mother, who didn't even want me. She then went on to call my birth mom nasty things, and that's when I snapped. I told her that I didn't want anything to do with her. I didn't care if I got even a single penny from dad, but she had to stop insulting me, and the only reason I shut my mouth for so long was because of my dad. But now she was crossing a line. That's all I said, but it was enough for her to run to my dad screaming and saying that I disrespected her and that I was an ungrateful brat and should be kicked out of the house. To my surprise, my dad got super angry at me and slapped me. He said that I had ruined his life once and he wasn't going to let me do it again. He dragged me out of the house and said that adopting me was the biggest mistake he made and he didn't need me anymore because he had a new family and his own kid with his own flesh and blood. He said that blood is thicker than water and he would do anything to save this toxicity from the bad omen that was me because I ruined everything that I touched. He said that I was not welcome in the house anymore, and since I was turning 18 in a couple of months, I couldn't do anything to him for kicking me out. He was drunk and emotionally manipulated. I don't even think he knew half of what he was saying, but every word felt like I was being stabbed. Before he slammed the door in my face, I could see a victorious smile on Stacy's face. He abandoned me. It hurt. I didn't think he hated me that much, but now I knew he did. I wanted to tell him so much, but I knew that he would never take my side and it was pointless. The only thing I ever wanted, a family that was given to me and then taken away from me so brutally. I was at my lowest point in my life, and if it wasn't for my grandparents and boyfriend, I would probably not be here today. My grandparents tried to talk some sense into my dad, but he didn't budge. Apparently, Stacy had told him to choose between me and her, plus the baby, and he chose her. I tried apologizing on call, but he ignored me and didn't speak. I stayed with my grandparents till I turned 18, after which I moved in with my boyfriend James. He's my rock. He helped me get back to my feet and pulled me out of this abyss of sadness that I was in. With his help, I slowly began gathering the remnants of my life back and piecing it all together bit by bit. There was still a huge void that was in my heart that could never be filled, but each day I was getting better. As the years flew by, I tried to forget the past and move on. I started building my life with James, studying and working together. I would occasionally get contacts about my dad from my grandparents, but he never contacted me directly. About 6 months ago, I began thinking about my birth parents a lot. I didn't know them, but wanted to get more information about them and my ancestors. So, I decided to do a DNA test. Apart from telling you about your gene pool and ancestry, these DNA tests also tell you if you have any living relatives and put you in contact with them if you're interested. This was one of the main reasons why I wanted to do it. So, I was so anxious when I heard that I had a paternal first cousin who was in the same city as me. I felt that this would be a huge clue to find out who my dad is. My jaw dropped when I found out that this cousin was my actual cousin whom I had grown up with, Richard's sister's son. This didn't make any sense to me, and I redid the test just to make sure, and I got back the same result. This could only mean one thing. I was Richard's biological daughter. I don't know how, when, why, or where this happened, but he was my real dad. I don't think he knew that he even had another child. Somewhere along the line, fate brought us together, only to separate us again. I wanted to tell him about this so bad, but if I did, I knew that I would be ruining his current relationship. We were already on terrible terms, and it had taken me a long time to put myself back together again. I decided to spare myself from all the trauma and drama, and just pretend that none of this happened. I had lived my life for 5 years without him, and I would continue to do so. I began to move on again, but yesterday I had the most unexpected visitor. My dad came to my apartment. This was the first time I had seen him in 5 years, and now that I knew the truth about our relationship, I couldn't help but start crying. He came up to me and told me that he had made a huge mistake by letting me go. He said that he had caught Stacy cheating on him with another man and that she admitted that their kid was not actually his child, but another man's child, and that she had been cheating on him this whole time. He began hugging me and weeping, saying that he thought blood was thicker than water, but he was wrong, and that even though we weren't related, I was his true child, the one that he adopted with my mom, and that he loved me, but he was too blinded by grief and Stacy to acknowledge it for all these years. He apologized to me multiple times, saying that he didn't deserve any forgiveness, but he wanted to clear his conscience. He started begging me to give him one more chance and get back into his life. I couldn't contain it anymore. After hearing all this, I blurted out the DNA test results and told him that he was my biological dad. He was stunned and looked like he was about to faint. We were both so overwhelmed we couldn't speak and decided to meet tomorrow to talk about everything. I still don't know what to make of this, or whether I even forgive him. I guess I'll find out tomorrow. Should I have told him about the DNA test? So, a lot has happened. I met him yesterday, and saying that we were both emotional wrecks would be an understatement. I showed him my DNA test results, and he still was so stunned. I asked him if he knew who my birth mom was, and if he knew that he had a kid out there somewhere, but he was clueless. He said that he was being pretty reckless in his mid-20s and had a lot of meaningless romantic interests before settling down and marrying Susan. He said that he had no idea who my birth mother was, and that he had absolutely no clue that he had fathered a child. None of his flings told him about any pregnancy. He said that the fact that he had unknowingly adopted his own child was not a coincidence, but fate. He also told me that he was divorcing Stacy, and even though her kid was not technically his, he was still so fond of him and was going to support him. He said that he began noticing Stacy's weird behavior only recently because he had been so blinded by her that he decided to ignore all the red flags. But catching her with her boyfriend on their own bed was the last straw. I told him that I knew that Stacy was only in it for the money, but didn't say anything because I didn't want to ruin another relationship. I felt like it was finally my turn to speak. I told him everything about how unfair it was that he blamed me for mom's death, how he isolated me when I needed him the most, and how I got no support and comfort, but only accusations from him for so many years. I told him that I was in a depression, Yet he did nothing to help me. I never troubled him, never made myself a nuisance, but he so easily believed all the lies that were told about me. I told him that I would never forget those hurtful words he told me the night I got kicked out. I still have major trauma for all those events and sometimes wake up at night with cold shivers from all the nightmares. He just closed his eyes and listened to me, too guilty to even look at me. I said that I had loved him with all my heart. He was the only man I trusted, but even he broke that trust and hurt me more than anyone had. I had loved him before I even knew he was my biological dad, but even that doesn't change the fact that I am still deeply traumatized by what he did, and I wasn't sure if I could forgive him for that. He was weeping now. He said that he realized that what he did was wrong and that he cursed himself every day for what he did. He said that he was a terrible dad, but we did have our good moments too. Back when Susan was alive, he said that all he wants is forgiveness and another chance to be a real dad to me, but that he respected my choice and would stay out of my life if that's what I wanted. So yeah, the problem is, I don't know what I want, and I just need time. I'll update you soon. Hi, it's been a couple of months since my last post. I have been in contact with my dad. I still haven't forgiven him yet, but we are on friendlier terms. He has quit drinking, and sometimes I can see glimpses of his old self, and that makes me so happy. I told him that it has taken me a very long time to become who I am today and make a life for myself. I wasn't going to let anyone ruin it, not even him. He still had to gain my trust back. I made it clear to him that even though we were on talking terms now, that doesn't guarantee that things are okay between us. He had accepted it. I can tell that he's trying to be a part of my life, but not overstepping his boundaries. I even introduced him to James last week. James is still very bitter to my dad, and rightfully so. But he was the one who saw me at my worst, and it was because of my dad. So he isn't very friendly, but I know that he'd respect whatever decision I make. I think I'm okay with how things are right now. I do want my dad back in my life, but I am scared that history is going to repeat itself, and I don't want to face it. Even though he has apologized to me multiple times, I still can't forget the past. Right now, we talk every week and meet a few times a month. He's dealing with his own divorce and custody battle, and I don't want any part of that, so I'm keeping my distance. Hello guys, thank you for all the advice, I appreciate it. I have ultimately chosen my sanity over everything. I told my dad that I would be on better terms with him, but it's still going to take a very long time for me to trust him enough to integrate him back into my life. I only said this because I knew that Susan would have hated seeing us like this. So for her, I'm willing to extend this olive branch, and he agreed to it. But he said that he was willing to wait even for decades if it meant that he could talk to me. For now, I'm focusing on my relationship, work and studies. I do feel like a huge weight has been lifted off me, and I'm hoping for the best. And that was a wrap up for today's story. Thank you very much for listening. Smash that like button and subscribe for more stories. Thanks again, and we'll be seeing you in the next one.